everyone. We're here with Sidhant Kumar. He is an excellent data privacy lawyer. Has his own independent practice. He's written books. They've been cited by the Supreme Court, and I can go on and on and on. But the idea of having him here is to sort of break down data and privacy versus India versus the world and what's actually happening. Because obviously it's scary, yet it's new. We don't know what's happening with the laws. It's sort of all over the place, yet data is important. What is your take on this, Siddhant?
Thank you for having me. I think as far as data being the new oil is concerned, Prime Minister is absolutely right. Data has become more and more central to everything that we do in terms of our economic transactions and our social interactions and every transaction that we use given the all-pervading nature of the internet and the use of technology. So that's why data has become more important. Its privacy is no longer about the peeping Tom. It's about the surveillance state and the capitalism that runs on data. So that's why it's so central. It's no longer a fringe human rights issue. It's an everyday existence issue.
Right.
And as far as India is concerned, we've seen the new personal data protection bill, which has a huge amount of progress in terms of thinking in data protection, but it leaves much to be desired on enforcement. It creates offenses and sort of a sledgehammer approach to enforcement, which in my view, in a technology focused sector may just be counterproductive.
Right.
It doesn't give a platform or a framework for government and regulators to interact with companies and businesses and technology innovators to come up with more efficient and usable and practical regulation on data protection, which is the need of the hour. The government is never going to be the domain expert on these issues.
Yes.
That input needs to come from industry and cutting edge businesses before we kill innovation.
Right.
As far as India's approach is concerned, it is also an element of protectionism. India wants to promote its own outsourcing industry versus the world and therefore restrict cross-border data flow. I think that's going to be a very narrow, restrictive approach.
Right.
It's going to result in a new form of trade war and reciprocal restrictions on India and data coming in and out of India.
Can you expand on this? Like, why do you think it'll create sort of this influx trade war?
So when you increase the costs of doing business in India in terms of forcing foreign companies to host data locally,
right.
It's already being done for credit card companies like Visa and MasterCard
right.
Through the RBI,
right.
And it's proposed to be done through the Personal Data Protection Bill for critical personal data. What you're doing is you're increasing market entry, and
right.
the cost of market entry going up higher is going to result in reciprocal restraints on Indian businesses, Indian online and outsourcing businesses using foreign data and growing. And there's a huge industry in India.
Right.
And we need to think long term about this.
Okay.
Data and the internet are going to thrive only if they're open and cross-border flow of data is unrestricted.
Right.
However, keeping all of that in mind,
I was just going to say,
bringing consumers central to the whole conversation. Consumers need to have certain rights, and those rights need to be enforced through easily accessible means. Now, that's a balancing act that every government policymaker needs to contend with, and the current framework or the current proposals don't do that.
Okay. What do you think how we stand versus in the States or say the EU law? Because EU law, I would say, is sort of the benchmark of data protection.
Yes, that's the idea. It's a benchmark depending on what your objective is.
Okay.
The approach various jurisdictions have taken on privacy has been totally different. As far as the US is concerned, it's taken a light touch regulation, almost reluctant regulation on data protection, while the EU has been more proactive and more stringent in terms of regulating data,
right.
Which it's also a time for us to consider, given the economy that India is and the growth trajectory that India is likely to see in the next 10 to 20 years, right. And the innovation that we seek to encourage and foster,
right.
We don't want a sledgehammer regulatory approach which kills innovation.
Right. So you're saying at one go we're doing Make for India, we're trying to get innovation, we're trying to open up the FDI,
That's
but
right.
On the other end of the spectrum, we have these data laws which will restrict that.
Data laws aren't the problem. It's creating criminal offenses out of minor misdemeanors.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the problem. You can't use a nuclear bomb to kill a fly. That's the idea.
Right.
But
that's what's happening.
Yeah, but nobody can quarrel with the proposition that the fly needs to be killed. So that's what we're talking about. So it's all going to be counterproductive. I think it's very important to preserve the quality of the internet. The internet has
Right.
changed the way we do business.
Of course.
It has completely collapsed costs of capital.
Yeah.
And building data protection laws that restore that capital costs
Right.
is going to be counterproductive. For instance, the data protection bill requires consent managers and data protection officers of significant data collectors to be hosted locally.
Okay.
Now, the length of time between a business, like say for example, Facebook becoming popular
Okay.
and having a whole host of consumers,
Right.
and it being able to open up physical offices in various parts of the world is hugely short.
Yes.
So you're going to restrict yourself to all these new age businesses that will become popular in a matter of months.
Right.
Because
TikTok.
suddenly you'll have this business which will be a significant data fiduciary, which collects a significant amount of data, which over a very short period of time,
Yeah.
and the Indian government and the regulator will come back and say, you need a data protection officer here. So you realize you're going to isolate India from the market.
Right.
I mean, just by way of example, we take great pride in Indian market being a huge market, and that will offset the regulatory cost. But that's
Right.
simply not true. The math doesn't add up. For every Facebook consumer in India or South Asia, which includes China, the Facebook earns about $40 on average.
Okay.
Versus a consumer in the United States, Facebook earns $120. So the purchasing power comparison is just skewed.
Yeah.
So if India is going to come down on a sledgehammer, restrictive on business and innovation approach on regulation and data protection, it will neither protect data nor will it help innovation. It will only kill the sector.
Amazing.
So all these great ideals about data protection will all be lost if the enforcement mechanism is just a strangulation of innovation.
Got it.
You need an everyday compliance mechanism.
Okay.
Where you impose penalties.
Okay.
You impose monetary penalties depending on the misdemeanor that is.
Okay.
And the harm that it causes.
Right.
Criminal offense, putting somebody in prison doesn't really serve the purpose in this context.
Yeah.
I mean, the Companies Act is a totally different ballgame. But as far as data is concerned, data is going to be used willy-nilly every day.
Every day.
And
all the time.
And all businesses.
Yeah.
So you can't penalize businesses for doing business. So that you need to find a way where you're able to strike that balance.
Right.
And creating criminal offenses just doesn't cut it. It doesn't serve the purpose.
So should we do it the way they're doing it abroad?
So yes, even in the European Union, which is the most stringent, most restrictive privacy regime in the world, there are no criminal offenses.
Wow, I did not know that.
And yes, so that's the idea. Now, for example, look at the anonymization standard that India proposes. India proposes that data should be anonymized irreversibly. That's technologically impossible. No data will ever be irreversibly anonymized. You could apply various technological means and re-identify the same data, which will result in a criminal offense under the current proposals.
Oh, wow.
And that's not even a standard in the EU.
And that's the most stringent one.
That's right.
Okay.
So we're looking at an unrealistic protection regime, which will not even cover the rights that it seeks to give to citizens.
Okay.
It will just circumvent India.
There won't be any freedom of blah blah blah.
And there won't be any innovation, no new online products coming to in the Indian market. It's going to also mean a very restrictive internet experience for Indian consumers, and it's ultimately also going to mean people are going to circumvent.
Yeah. That's where all the illegal stuff starts happening then.
And people are just going, with the internet, territorial jurisdiction is just not a challenge anymore.
Right.
People are going to host websites out of other countries and outside the reach of Indian enforcement agencies and still continue to do what they were doing before. So really the law thereafter serves no purpose.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sidhant. This was exceedingly helpful, and I think, yes, we have a lot to change and a lot to do, but hopefully getting there with conversations like these.
I'm glad. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.